Thank you, mate. Thank you very much. Yeah, really good. For that, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Are they on?
1, 2.
We'll see. Maybe Louise. Have you got a mic, Louise, or you'll need this one?
Am I all right to put this down here?
He's nicked my notes.
Oh, this? Sorry.
This guy there. Thank you.
I want to see the questions. Are we comfy?
Yeah, a bit bumpy. Can I turn it round? You know.
Okay.
Happy to go? Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. How are you all doing? All okay today? It's lovely to be back in this wonderful venue, and I'm delighted to be here for this evening's event. I love the theme. It's activity, movement and inclusion, which is right up my street, as I'm sure you'll learn as we go out throughout the evening, and our wonderful panel here are going to share their insights on that theme. Before I get underway, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Louise Hunt. I'm a Paralympic athlete, broadcaster and public speaker, and I'm your host for this evening, and I'm just delighted to be here in this role, but as I said, to be joined by our expert panel who I'm going to introduce, and then we'll go into some questions to get your expert opinions and advice on things, and then at the end we'll have some time for a Q&A too. So if you think about anything you'd like to ask any of us, have a think throughout and we'll get to that at the end. So to begin with, if you give us a little wave, that would be great as I introduce each of you. So Dave, we'll start with you at the end. We've got the wonderful Dave Sibley with us, who is the Managing Director of Zumba Fitness in Europe, India and MEA, and overseeing the growth and development of the Zumba fitness business in those territories. In parallel, Dave oversees business development globally, working with partners wishing to license the company's brand or content, or access a range of consulting and creative services. Dave joined Zumba from Viacom, now Paramount Global, where he ran the international global ex-US sales division. Prior to this, he served as managing director for Viacom's Australasian media businesses, comprising the MTV, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central channels and brands. Dave started his 17-year Viacom tenure in a marketing position, having worked in marketing roles in the ad agency and fashion industries after university in the UK, where he acquired a degree in business. He now lives in London with his family and is a keen cyclist and guitarist in his spare time. So could we welcome Dave, please, with a round of applause. And next up, we have Rebecca Legon. Probably work out who Rebecca is. Rebecca Legon is an inclusive model, adaptive sports person, and lover of the great outdoors. She proudly represented England in amputee football in the inaugural Women's World Cup in Colombia in 2024, and now plays paddle for the UK on an inclusive paddle tour. A keen hiker and lover of physical challenges, Rebecca believes the mind is often stronger than the body. Through her advocacy, she inspires others to embrace adaptation, believe in themselves, and recognise that almost anything is possible when you believe it. So can we welcome Rebecca, please? And last but not least, we've got Mark to my right here. So Mark brings more than 35 years of experience across Paralympic and disability sports development and the wider social impact of sport. He is the director of Bullock Inclusion and also works with Bright Ideas for Tennis and Penathlon, helping drive more inclusive opportunities across the sector. His career includes 15 years with the ITF, all of which I think I had the pleasure of sharing with you, Mark, where he travelled to more than 80 countries developing wheelchair tennis, and he has attended 5 Paralympic Games and 2 Olympic Games in roles ranging from coach to technical delegate. He works at Wimbledon, adding to a career that has shaped inclusive sport at both grassroots and international level. His impact has also been recognised through major honours, including the Brad Parks Award and the Coach of the Year in the UK. Passionate about diversity, inclusion, well-being and healthy lifestyles, Mark is an experienced leader, coach, mentor, speaker and consultant. Still active himself, Mark plays tennis, runs, practices yoga and has taken part in inclusive challenge events that reflect his lifelong commitment to making sport more accessible to all. So welcome, Mark. So we've got quite a lineup, as you can see there. And as I said prior to introducing this wonderful panel, our theme tonight is activity, movement and inclusion. And in particular, we're going to touch upon the incredible milestone of wheelchair tennis, which is celebrating 50 years this year. Wheelchair tennis was actually my sport, so throughout my athletic career, I was a tennis player. As I mentioned, Mark and I's careers overlapped a bit, so I'm especially excited that we get to include that in the celebrations tonight. But before we kind of get into sort of more of the in-depth parts when we talk about movement and activity, I'd love the three of you just to reflect a little bit and just think about the question of when sport or movement first became part of your identity. And we'll start with you, Mark, as you've got the microphone.
Thanks, Louise. I think I was actually there when Louise started her tennis career, 5 years old.
I know I look younger, don't I?
So, movement and sport's been part of my whole life, really. I think I started playing tennis when I was 7 or 8 years old, and it's become my career. So, but I'm passionate about it in the wider sense. Obviously, sport and physical activity is important, but also just general movement, active travel and building movement into our everyday lifestyle. So it's much wider than just sporting performance.
Perfect. Pass it down, that'd be brilliant.
Hello everyone. Okay, so movement and sport has been a massive part of my life. It's a huge part of my identity. One of my earliest memories actually are when doctors told my mum, because of my limb difference, that I might not be able to do the things that other kids did. And ever since then, even as a kid, I didn't want to be defined by my limb difference. I didn't want to have limitations placed on me on what I could and couldn't do. And I did all the things that they said that I couldn't do. Yay! Oh, there's a little bit of a sad part now. But when I started secondary school, it would have been about the 90s. And unfortunately, my insecurities kicked in, and all the sports that I loved, I was just really self-conscious. There was no pathways or adaptations for me to partake in these any longer, so I kind of dropped out of it, and it was a really tough time in my life. Fortunately, in my mid-20s, I found my passion for sport again and learned how to adapt fitness and sport as an amputee, and I'm 46 this year and still partaking in new sports, and one of them is paddle for the Inclusive Paddle Tour, which I absolutely love. So what I'm just saying, I wanted to explain just my whole life, fitness and sport is a massive part of my identity. It's everything that I live and breathe, and I absolutely love it.
Brilliant, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, I have to say, my intro, I sounded like a very corporate kind of guy, but I promise you, I'm not as corporate as I sounded in that little intro. But I have no sporting achievements to speak of, and I'm here really to learn. I mean, I can give you a few little insights about Zumba, but I'm here because I want to learn more so I can be more supportive. But I guess in answer to the question of movement becoming part of my identity, I'll tell you about when I was looking for a job at Zumba, and I went to a class to check it out. And this is about 10 years ago, and I got to the back of the class. I was trying to join in and succeeding to some extent, and I realised that everyone in the class was very welcoming. I could be part of it without feeling self-conscious. And if anyone's ever been to a Zumba class, you'll realise there are moments in the class where people whoop, and I was hearing this whooping happening, and 2 or 3 minutes into the class, I found myself involuntarily whooping. And it was at that moment that I realised that this could be part of my life going forward. There you go.
I think I'm going to take away the phrase involuntary whooping.
Yes.
And I've got a feeling we've all probably had those moments. Hopefully we'll have some tonight too. But that was brilliant. Thank you all so much. It's really interesting actually to hear the variety of kind of how that's become part of your identity. So thank you for that. It's fantastic. And I mentioned sort of at the very beginning that we are celebrating the 50 years of wheelchair tennis. So Mark, I just wanted to come to you and sort of just ask you that, having worked within wheelchair tennis globally, as I mentioned before, at the International Tennis Federation and in several other roles, have you seen the sport grow and influence disability more broadly?
Yeah, I think very much so. I mean, I think I alluded to it earlier. I think that sport is, we don't live in silos, and sport has been part of what's provided visibility. And I think wheelchair tennis in different countries is at different stages, but it has very much provided visibility. And I'm going to give a presentation later on the story of Wimbledon, which I think emphasises that wider aspect of, for example, getting disabled people on television, getting people in newspapers, and providing that wider platform, so not just the sport itself. And when I show the presentation later, you will see, I try and emphasise some of the non-sporting things that the wheelchair tennis event at Wimbledon has brought to Wimbledon. Not just the sporting, you see matches on court one, on TV, but it has changed the culture of the whole organisation, and that's true across the world and at different levels. So I've recently done some work with Kazakhstan, and when I was out there, I don't think I saw a disabled person until they came to my workshop, because they couldn't access society, they couldn't. And we were in a hotel where we're having to put in plywood ramps so that they can access the hotel. But again, as a consequence of that, it gets them thinking, and I can tell many stories of when I've gone back to a country and changes have been made wider than just the sport itself. So I think, the visibility of sport and fashion and anything that puts people in the public eye. And Rebecca and I were talking about social media, and social media has its downsides, but it's also a great platform for providing visibility and seeing people like themselves doing things, and also non-disabled people seeing disabled people doing things. So I think it's not just about the sport. In fact, for me, we spend too much time talking about the sport, and we should be focusing more on the benefits of sport and the wider things that it brings. So a long answer to a short question. No,
it's absolutely brilliant. It's a brilliant answer. And actually, I just want to tell a really quick story of my personal experience, which I know that you know about, Mark, because it involves your lovely wife, sat to the left-hand side of me. But we talk about, that broader impact of sport. And I sometimes think that it's hard to believe that you can be something unless you see it. And I had this exact experience so I think I've worked out that I was 14 years old when I first met Sam. And she was the first glamorous, beautifully stunning woman I'd ever met in a wheelchair. And I know her head's going to get massive after this. But it might sound really unusual, but it had almost not occurred to me up until that point of my life that I could be like that. I could embrace, my womanhood, fashion, hair, makeup. And actually, I had no idea the confidence that could bring me. And I remember when I met Sam, just thinking, wow, I want to be like you. And that's honestly a true story. And having spent quality time with her on the tennis tour, playing alongside you, of course, over time, I learned the tricks of the trade, let's say. Let's say I hopefully learned to dress a little bit better, learned to do hair, makeup, things like that. But the important thing is it's not even about those external things. It was the confidence it brought me. And because of Sam, that's why I feel the way I do now about my body and how I look, and it's because of you that I've learned to do that, because I saw it and went, I can be that too. So we talk about that wider and that broader impact. I had a very good tennis career. I'm very proud of that, the wins, the world rankings and things. But actually, as a retired athlete, these are the things that I remember, and these are the things that have a lasting impact on me. It's the friendships I made, it's the confidence I built, and the amazing people I met along the way. So I totally get everything you're saying, and I think that broader impact of sport is super important. So I've just added to your answer there, Mark. Sorry, hope that's okay. Amazing. So when we so we sort of touched upon, you know, the competitive side of sport, and we can end up talking, like you say, sometimes too much about that when we're talking about competitive sport. So when we think of that movement beyond that, Rebecca, obviously you play amputee football, and you mentioned you're exploring multiple sports, which I think is fantastic. So what does movement mean for your identity, but also for your confidence, and what's that bringing to you in your life now?
You know, partaking in sport, it's not about, you know, for me, it brings confidence in so many ways. It's being part of a community as well. It's the social aspect of it. It's achieving your sporting goals. You know, I am a huge advocate for fitness, that we can, like, our mind is much stronger than our physical form, and we can adapt within reason and overcome most barriers. And for me personally, fitness is everything. You know, I'll wake up and I'll do an exercise circuit at home. I just love the way I feel from the endorphins, you know, and so I love to advocate that for everybody else too. You know, fitness, it improves our mental health, it improves our physical health, but it's also the camaraderie, the social aspects to it. There's so many benefits to it. You know, and like obviously I'm going to touch on what you guys were saying earlier. You know, I really did, when I was growing up as a teenager, I didn't really know anybody else like me. You know, I had a limb difference. All my peers, they were non-disabled and everything. And when I joined social media, I started to see other people like me, and it gave me the confidence that, like what you were saying when you met Sam, such a similar story and everything, and it's having those like role models or being a role model for other people out there. So I think awareness is really, really important as well. So yeah, I'm all about fitness and sport for identity and improving people's lives massively. Yeah.
I think a few people would like to join you on your morning circuits too. I saw Mark perk up there. So but yeah, no, very impressive. Absolutely, I can relate so much to what you just said. And,
I have to work out before the kids though, before I take them to school. So
well,
it's the only time I can fit it in.
That's very early then. If any early risers, you know where to go for that inspiration. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And Dave, in dance and Zumba, the goal obviously is expression rather than competition. How does that shift changes people's relationships with movement?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think it ultimately becomes expression. I think before expression, it's just about participation. You know, when you first go to a class, you feel a little bit concerned as to whether you can do it or not. And so your first stage is just working out, can I do this? Which of course everybody can. And so you start to learn your steps, and then you're doing it. And once you've cracked the basics of doing it, you can then relax into actually expressing yourself. And we find that people in Zumba classes really enjoy expressing themselves. And they do so because they find themselves in an environment where nobody's judging them. And that really is the key to getting people in the first place to come to the class and give it a go, and then in the second place, advance their participation into actually expressing themselves. And the reason this has happened, it's quite fascinating, really. When Zumba started, it was one guy who invented it, and two other guys joined him, and they made a DVD of the guy that invented it and sold it as a workout DVD. It was very successful. People were buying the DVD, but they were calling up saying, we'd like to actually be the instructor. We'd like to be the guy on the screen, not just follow the class. And so Zumba pivoted into being an instructor training business, which is what we now are. So we started offering training to instructors to become Zumba instructors. And what we found was the people that gravitated in were just absolutely delightful. There were people that wanted to give others the opportunity to join in, to not be judgmental about them, to be inclusive about them, to change their lives, really, to help them get fitter and feel better. And that has become the mood, the value that prevails in Zumba classes around the world, which means when you start the journey and you're trying to participate and then you're trying to self-express, the tone that's been set in the class is a very welcoming one. And I think it's kind of a learning that, you know, we can't even take credit for that. It kind of happened, and now obviously we celebrate it. We proudly communicate that we've got this lovely inclusive atmosphere. But I think that the key in many ways to other sports achieving the same level of participation and involvement from all people is the person that's teaching that class. It's the person that's welcoming the people into the class. It's that person who makes them feel not only welcome, but able to succeed in that class. And that's something that organically Zumba has achieved, and we're very proud of, and I think is a learning for, for other sporting disciplines in the way that they bring new people into their discipline.
Can I just say something?
Please do.
I'd just like to add to that because I was talking to you about it earlier, wasn't I? I actually have been participating in Zumba and I've been doing it on my running blade and I've joined just the regular class and everything, and it is really, really inclusive space and I very much enjoyed it.
Are you paying her for this, Dave? Is she on commission? Or?
Thank you for that £100.
No, that's fantastic, and it's lovely to hear that real life example there as well as bringing to life kind of what you were talking about. And it's interesting. My next question for you was actually going to be, is movement about performance or is it about belonging? But I almost feel like you've answered that. But from what you're saying, Dave, it sounds like that's very much created through the instructors as much as the participants. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. It's the mood in the class, and I think the way it's evolved, as I say, it was an organic thing where the people that wanted to become instructors just turned out to be really nice people, and then because that tone was set, more nice people wanted to join, and then we've been able to celebrate that as as what a Zumba class is. And so I think to make fitness effective, you need to want to do it again. And people want to go back to their Zumba class because they enjoy it. They want to go back because they want to see their instructor, they want to see their pals in the class. And so, to your point, it is about that belonging. It's about that drive to be part of that group again. And there's something if I can waffle for a moment on this is quite a fascinating thing that we've learned, that when you're dancing in unison with people, there is something hardwired from our tribal history, hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, that we really want to express that we're part of that tribe. And we used to dance in our tribe at the end of the day to celebrate that we caught some food or for whatever reason. And so there's something in our brain that reacts very positively when we dance in unison, which means that if we're in a class together, Louise and I, and you're on the other side of the room,
Let's go.
We're dancing in unison together, we might not have any interaction. I mean, we might just clock each other from across the room, but as we leave the class, we're pals. We're bonded. We're somehow bonded. And that feeling of having bonded with all these people in that class is very nourishing. It's very fulfilling. So there's some kind of science there in that dancing in unison is very positive for us.
100%. That makes total sense to me. I think we can all relate, even if it hasn't been in a class, but even if you go to a family party or anything, dancing together, singing together, all those types of movements and bringing a community together. You are right. It's funny how you leave and you may have never spoken yet. You feel like you've got a connection. So exactly. I think that's a brilliant example. And for Rebecca and Mark, sort of the same question I'd love to ask you both as well. Do you feel that movement is about performance, or do you feel it's about belonging? And in your experience, how does that represent for you two?
Well, for me, I think it's both, because obviously you want to have a good performance, don't you? And you want to achieve your goals, but at the same time, you want to belong to a community. You want to have similar people that you get on with, achieving goals and everything. So yeah, it's all about camaraderie. It's all about team spirit, but it's also about performance and achieving those goals too, in the same setting. So yeah, I think it's both. Most importantly, both.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I think I do agree with that totally. I think it is both, and working in the environment that I do at Wimbledon and in the past working with high-performance athletes, it's how we protect both. Yeah? And I think it's more important than we realise. And when we had COVID and some of the players played some of the big events behind closed doors, and they literally were only allowed to practice with their own coach. I interviewed a couple of them as we were planning for Wimbledon 2021 and how we were going to deal with COVID. And a couple of players said to me, if this carries on, I'm not playing. And that really hit home to me that, well, clearly they're not going just to play tennis. They're going because they're part of something bigger. And that sense of belonging is really, really important. Whether you're doing a Zumba class or you're going to your beginner's wheelchair tennis session for the first time, or you're competing at the very, very highest level, there is very much a camaraderie about it. I mean, Louise will know from the players' lounges at the Grand Slams, and I think it's something we've got to try and maintain within wheelchair tennis in particular, that it is still very much a family. It's a competitive family, and it has evolved. Yeah, it's not quite as perhaps friendly as it used to be, which in a way is a good thing, because there's more at stake. But there is very much a sense of belonging, and just one of the things that I'm really pleased about within tennis and what Wimbledon and the other Grand Slams have achieved, that sense of belonging is non-disabled and, in this case, wheelchair tennis players together. It's not two separate families, as it. Now, the first Australian Open I went to, the wheelchair players were in one side of the players' lounge, the non-disabled players on the other side of the lounge. Now, it's just one big tennis family.
Can I comment on that? Is that okay? Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of sort of touch on that really, because I've started playing paddle, which is absolutely incredible. But I play at a paddle club, and I'm the only person so far with a disability that's playing there. But I always book in for matches with non-disabled people, and because I have so wheelchair users and above knee amputees, they get a second bounce adaptation, and that just completely levels the playing field. So that enables me to go to the sports club, not feel any different, and to be able to partake in paddle with everyone else. And it is such a, I absolutely love it. It's such a wonderful community. And you know what's so brilliant about it is that I can go partake at paddle but not feel different. And that's what we all want, isn't it, really?
Well, absolutely. And I think for me personally, you've just summed up the definition of what inclusion is. Of course, there's a time and a place where, say, for example, myself playing against another player in a wheelchair is fantastic, but inclusion is everybody together. It's not everybody in, you know, their pockets and their identities. It's adapting so we can all partake together. So I think that's a really lovely summary of what inclusion means in my view. So that's fantastic. And I just want to kind of address, we'll start with you, Mark, as you've got the microphone. I'd love you just to sort of give us some perspective on what barriers still exist today, but especially from a major sporting event background that you've got.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because there are undoubtedly barriers still there, and in an international context they vary enormously. I think things are not perfect in this country by any means, but when you see the presentation around Wimbledon, huge strides have been made to make that club and that venue more inclusive, but the barriers are still there. We still face situations in this country where a tennis club will ask me whether wheelchair users can go on the court, or will they damage the courts? And that we know that's not the case, but if someone is told that, then that's effectively a no. So there's a lot of attitudinal barriers still to break through. There's, in a sporting context, there's an awful lot of sports clubs that are still not physically accessible for wheelchair users. So there's lots of work still to be done, but I do think we are making strides. And I'd be interested to get your feedback after I've spoken about Wimbledon, as to whether you think, because I'm not convinced trickle down always works, yeah. But if a venue and an event like Wimbledon are doing what they're doing, is that having an impact on wider society and other tennis clubs? And I think the answer is it's not perfect. It's yes and no. Yeah, the trickle-down effect is not as effective in all walks of life as we would like it to be, I think. So it's working on the whole ecosystem, and we have still got a huge amount of work to do. And Rebecca talks about paddle, and I'm a tennis person, and the culture around perhaps paddle being perceived to be more inclusive, when actually, in my opinion, it's tennis. But there are some perceptions out there that paddle is different to tennis. Yeah, but also, as Rebecca said, paddle has one of the risks of paddle is it's expensive. So there are some financial barriers there as well. So I think all the barriers that we talk about generally, they are still there. Hopefully they're being chipped away at, but there's still a huge amount of work to be done across the whole sporting ecosystem to make it more inclusive. And there are pockets of really good examples like Zumba, like I was doing some work with the Queen's Club Foundation yesterday, not far from here, some fantastic work being done, but it's still very much in pockets. And just to, like, I do some work in blind tennis, and north of the river where we are now, blind tennis is fairly well known within the tennis circles. I went south of the river, 15 miles, and people haven't heard of it. So we've still got a lot of work to do.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There's lots of work to be done, but at least we've got some great examples of places doing the right things that we can now use, which is really good. And Rebecca, in your lived experience and the various sports you're partaking in, what barriers have you perhaps come across, or do you fear might be factors and reasons why people are struggling to partake?
Yeah, so when I, because I work within the amputee community as well, and what barriers that are quite common, for myself and a lot of other people within our community, is one of the biggest barriers is confidence. So if someone goes through, a traumatic accident and has an amputation or something, it's then kind of knowing, can I still partake in sport or do this again? And it's the uncertainty around it. So seeing people like them partaking in sport or fitness or anything like that really empowers these individuals to partake themselves. So confidence is a massive one. And then you also have like barriers such as financial barriers. For example, paddle, I'm unfortunate that I can afford it, but it is not accessible for anybody. It's sporting pathways and opportunities. There's not often many available, or they are. For example, when we train for amputee football, it's at Reese Heath up north, and I live near Brighton, and you have to fund all that yourself. You don't get any funding. So there are lots of different, and also like venue accessibility. Some people, like what we're finding with the paddle community at the moment, is a lot of these venues aren't accessible for wheelchairs, and it's there's so many barriers and so many things that we have to break down to make everything more inclusive. Hopefully it will get better. I think there's lots of work, as Mark was saying, to be done, but hopefully we're making some change.
So I was chuckling when you said about access with paddle, because I was invited to go and try paddle at a venue, and my chair wouldn't fit on the court. Oh. So that's why I was smiling, because exactly that, like, it was wonderful to be invited. I was so excited, but my chair wouldn't go on the court. We found a way. There's always a way. But there are things like that. There's so many areas. You've touched upon them already. The physical barriers, the structural, financial. I think it's great that you touched upon mindset. That can absolutely be a barrier. But Dave, when we look at the kind of representation in the mainstream fitness area that you're in, what barriers do you feel you come across?
Well, I think mindset's a big one. I mean, I will say that I'm sure there are, unfortunately, many venues that aren't accessible for people that want to come and do Zumba, and that's, that needs to change. That's not good enough. But I think there's also a huge mindset issue in disabled people feeling that there'll be an encumbrance on the class, feeling that if they come to the class, it will be awkward for the instructor to accommodate them, and they might spoil the experience for the other participants. That's certainly what I've heard in talking to people. And the truth is the opposite. The truth is that for the absolute most part, instructors are delighted when they have a disabled person that comes into their class, because it gives them the opportunity to improve that person's life. And they will go out of their way to ensure that they adapt the class, or they give suggestions for adaptation to that individual so they can participate and enjoy the class. And I think we need to do a better job of communicating that. I'm not sure that we communicate that clearly enough in our messaging, that when you get to a Zumba class, the instructor will not only welcome you, but will make significant endeavours to ensure that you really enjoy yourself. And Louise was telling me that a class that she goes to, or used to go to, and will go to again.
I will go to
with an instructor that I know called Sam. There'd be certain moves which she wasn't able to do, where Sam would communicate to her what she should do in the meantime. Yeah. And so the instructor Sam was specifically calling out alternative moves to make sure that Louise could get the most out of her class. And I think everyone's response in the class to that would be positive. That's not making the class in any way worse. That's making the class better. That's giving the experience to everyone in that class. a new dimension, which I think disabled people approaching the class probably don't realise that. And I think the more we can communicate that, the better.
Yeah, definitely. And like Sam, as you just mentioned, is a really good example of that. I had a great time. What's super cool is Sam's actually got a disability as well. So that's also a really exciting thing. We were chatting, weren't we, that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily, and we should, because everybody can do anything in any career, but you might not necessarily align someone like Sam with her disability and expect her to be a Zumba instructor, and she is an absolutely brilliant one. And I loved her class, and I had a great time, and I will go back.
Good.
I promise.
It's on the record now.
But yeah, it's on the record. It's written down. But yeah, I think that's some brilliant reflections, and I love that that's the approach of your instructors, that actually it's like everybody's welcome and we adapt. That class, like, we didn't even have a conversation about it. It just worked. She just adapted. I don't think anybody even noticed, which was the magic of it, because I just felt included like everyone else. Yeah, I could do everything, even though perhaps the more typical way in which that routine was set up wasn't made for me. She made it work. So yeah, I had an awesome experience. It was amazing. And in a minute, Dave's going to run a Zumba class. Did anyone?
Nice try. Nice try.
Amazing. That was some brilliant reflections there, guys. Thank you. So a question for all of you is, what could inclusive sport look like in 10 years' time? So look into the future. What could it look like?
I think the short answer to that is more inclusive, and alluding to what Rebecca's touched on, and where I think sports are going is, we talk about the inclusion spectrum, so sometimes we separate to include. So, for example, at Wimbledon, the wheelchair tennis players don't play the non-disabled players, but they're in the same environment. But I think there will be more and more opportunities where a disabled person can join their local sports club and join in on a Zumba class, they can join in a tennis session, join in a badminton session, and then they might choose to compete against people of a similar impairment, but their introduction and their overall journey will be in a much more inclusive setting. And I think tennis is probably leading the way, because the International Tennis Federation embraced wheelchair tennis in the 80s. And as I described earlier at the Grand Slams and other tennis environments, it's very common to have disabled and non-disabled players together. And just to conclude, we do a fundraising 24-hour tennis marathon at the National Tennis Centre in February. And we have complete beginners to current professionals, former professionals, para-standing, wheelchair, visually impaired, totally blind, deaf players, all playing together over the 24 hours. And I kind of look at that going, this shouldn't be a one-off. This should be what a tennis club looks like. We arrive at a tennis club and this environment is what you would expect, and it shouldn't be a one-off, because we've proved that it can be done through some adaptations, like Rebecca said, in tennis terms, the two-bounce rule, playing with a different ball if you're visually impaired, but that becoming the norm. I don't usually like the word normal, but the norm and an inclusive setting. And just generally more opportunities for disabled people to play sport at whatever level they choose, and locally. That's one of my, talking about barriers earlier, at the moment, if people want to play, they've probably got to go to a particular club. They can't go to their closest club, or they feel they can't go to their closest club, and hopefully the barriers will be broken down over time. So hopefully things will be much more inclusive, and for a different day, it'll be interesting to see where the Paralympics and Olympics go, whether they remain separate or whether they consider merging in some way, shape or form. But that's a massive discussion for another time.
Yeah, we might need an entire event based on that topic. And I was actually going to ask you, Rebecca, when you sort of answer this question around inclusive sport and the future of it, I would love your view on what Mark sort of touched upon there in terms of the integration of adaptive and non-adaptive sports, and even if you want to briefly touch upon the Paralympics and Olympics potentially being blended, also very welcome to touch upon that too.
So, of course, for me, I briefly touched earlier about my secondary school experience, and there not being any adaptations or, disability opportunity back then, and it was a really isolating time, and it was really, really tough. And so fast forward to today, playing paddle, it has been just such an inclusive experience for me. It is literally, I need to come and try tennis soon, Mark. I need to stop talking about paddle like
That's
this.
on the record.
And
That's
you're
on the
like,
record too.
excuse me, tennis is inclusive too.
We could just do a debate on tennis and paddle here, couldn't we, probably?
I know, at Zumba as well. But yeah, so it's just, I can't honestly describe enough the feeling of just being able to get involved in a sport, in a club, and not to feel different. It is just a wonderful, and as a disabled person, you don't want to enter an environment and you don't want to feel uncomfortable and you don't want to feel like the weaker link or that you don't fit in or anything like that. And it just feels just so natural, and everybody that I play with as well, they really enjoy it as well. They don't notice the difference either. So in the future, it would be great that sports could integrate more and be more inclusive to everyone. It would be fantastic for the Paralympics and the Olympics to merge and join forces. Of course, that would be great. I'd like paddle to be in there so I can play.
And Zumba for the first time.
And Zumba, yeah, let's do Zumba as well. And
I'll switch sports.
yeah. Just more accessibility and more opportunity. The funding, disability funding, where that goes to be allocated more to users and stuff. And yeah, just a more vibrant and flourishing future when it comes to sport and inclusion, really. That's what I'd like the future to be.
The future sounds bright to me.
Great. I think it is. Well, I'm going to question.
Yeah, the question is, I'm Ashley Pearce. I'm involved in the London Buddy Scheme, and we're involved with an organisation with Fulham Boat Reach. Fulham Boat Reach is one of 4 clubs that are being adapted for rowing for disabled people. It's not an inclusive sport because of the class sector. Disabled people, again, are at least 75% of being unemployed. For example, if you needed a monthly subscription to the rowing, it would cost you £80 for a month. Most disabled people can't afford £80 a month. Most non-disabled people can't afford to have a subscription of £80 a month. So I think that we need, as a collective, to get sponsorship, such as local authorities, to sign up to make sport more accessible for it. Plus, there needs to be more accessibility for new sporting activities that you're talking about, paddle sports. Are funding available? My question again is funding available to tap into that to get accessible part for community sports to engage and have disabled people without saying that I can't have a disabled person because I haven't got the equipment for it? Sorry to waffle on, of course.
Yeah, I think it's a great point.
No, it's a superb point, and I think we probably all know in the room that of the substantial financial barriers that we have as disabled people, even from the simple use of the right chair to the right equipment. In answer to your question about local authorities, one of the tough things in this country is they vary so greatly from area to area. So some local authorities do have funding available. So for example, I know that my local council puts funding into like adaptive tennis sessions, just because that's my area that I know about. I'm sure it happens in other sports too. But again, I know there's little pots of money. The LTA have different pots of money, for example, to support tennis across the country. But I know it does vary from area to area. And you are right when you mention about sponsorship. As an athlete, I had to rely on sponsorship greatly. But I also have friends now that are trying to access sport recreationally who are disabled, who have to get things funded or extra support into it. So I fully agree. It is absolutely a barrier that is very much stopping people from becoming active, and it shouldn't do. And as you mentioned, it's not just disabled people too. Unfortunately, cost of living is going up and it affects a lot of us. So I think the joy of sport, I was speaking to somebody earlier about this, is actually we can move for free. And I'm not saying that is a better option or what we should be doing. We should all be able to afford to go to fabulous Zumba sessions, paddle sessions, tennis sessions, football, basketball, whatever it may be. But the thing I always encourage people to do is movement is just so good for every part of your body and your mind. So even if it is just, I know that Sam and Mark actually are superb advocates to this. I'm always seeing on your Instagram that you're out doing yoga in the park. But I always encourage people that actually there are things you can do to move even with no cost. And there's online resources too. So there's some brilliant organisations and charities that put online resources available, such as Wheel Power. So they have several sessions a week, free of charge. They have online box fit, yoga, various different sessions which people can access too. So not ideal, but hopefully a few things to help people if they are wanting to access activity with a bit of guidance. There are some free resources.
Can I just come in there? There's a little bit of work that we're doing, again, it was within tennis that I know best, but trying to get sports clubs and tennis clubs in particular to think differently about their business model. Because when people talk about sustainability, that tends to be, well, the customer has to pay for it. Yeah? And what we're trying to encourage tennis clubs to do in particular is say, well, we're not expecting the coach to do it for free, but look at another source of income. So you are looking at grant funding, sponsorship, so that the sustainability side of it is not falling on the customer. The way most sports clubs think at the moment is their main source of income is membership revenue, and it's getting them to think more widely, and also how they creatively move the money that they've got around, by perhaps charging people that can afford it more, that allows them to have more financial flexibility to offer opportunities to people who can't afford it.
Sorry, I just wanted to touch on that. When I reached out to the paddle club in East Grinstead, my local paddle club, because there was nothing on their website about, disability or concessions or anything like that. And I reached out to them and explained, about myself, and they actually gave me the membership for free. So it's always very important, if you're interested in a new sport, do reach out to the club and the managers and speak to them, because if they don't actively offer it on, advertise it, you might be able to sort something out with them as well. And I've been very well supported there, which has been fantastic.
That's some brilliant advice. Could I just say that actually you never know unless you ask, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, not at all. No, it's interesting because I was going to sort of build on that point in terms of what sport could look like. And I know I keep raving about Zumba instructors, and I should clarify actually that we don't employ instructors, we train instructors, so they work for themselves, they're not our employees, but they're just fabulous people. And I think if we were able to get the same culture in instructors for other disciplines, where those instructors are very keen to welcome everybody into their class and keen to spend the time adapting the class or sport for individuals with different abilities, then I think things would change dramatically. So I think at the education level of instructors, I think we could change the way in which they're approaching the group of people that they intend to teach.
I don't think it should be there. The Kindred states that we should be included. There should be a policy that we are included at the end of the day. To say that we are included and you need to be adapting these things.
Yeah.
The Care Act states it.
I think I'm saying the same thing. I'm
not criticising anyone on the stage, but there's a lot of way to go. We've already got some sort of legal structure, policies, but there's a lot more way to go that we need to use these policies and procedures that we've already got in place.
Yeah.
And they're not being used properly, I don't think.
I totally agree. I mean, that's kind of my point, that
Sorry,
folks... No, it's an excellent point. And you're right, because the people that are responsible for teaching are not following the policies in that respect and are not welcoming and adapting in the way in which they should be. And that was my point, that I think that could change and should change over time, which would include a lot more people in sporting activities.
Yeah, brilliant. And we'll definitely keep some time for some questions at the end, guys. So, and I'll send a microphone around to make sure we can all hear then. Before we move on to a presentation from Mark, Dave, I've just got one question for you. When you're thinking about Zumba in particular, how could we inspire young people to take part, move without fear, and get involved?
Okay. Well, I'm going to say the line that I said to you earlier in answer to this question.
Involuntary whooping.
Because I want to get this in. So quite a fun way of thinking about activity is think about your body as if it is a pet dog. When you tell your dog that you're going to take it for a walk, how does it respond? It goes absolutely nuts. It's absolutely overjoyed. Now, this is how your body feels when it knows there's going to be some activity. Your body needs to be active. So I think if you think of your body as a pet dog, and you think of the satisfaction you're going to provide it with when you allow it to move, I think you'll find it easier to motivate yourself.
I absolutely love that answer, and I've already said to Dave earlier that I'm going to be taking that away with me and sharing with young people, that's for sure.
I just wanted to get it in before you stole it.
So
It might have been the wrong time to say it, but I thought I'd better get it in.
You did beat me to it. No, I thought that was perfectly placed. Thank you. Guys, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to give you two a little bit of a breather, and I'm actually going to hand over to Mark, who's going to go through a fabulous presentation about Wimbledon, as he mentioned earlier, and then we'll come back for a couple more questions from you guys, and then we'll wrap up after that.
Just while we're getting the presentation up, there's lots of things that come out from this evening that I'd kind of try and weave into this presentation about the wider benefits of sport, and in this case, what Wimbledon have done. And I am the substitute tonight. Geoff Newton was going to make this presentation, who's an honorary vice president of the club, but he couldn't be here, so I'm doing it on his behalf. And just telling you a little bit of the story of the journey of wheelchair tennis at Wimbledon, and where it came from, and where it's got to now. And it's all weaved into the fact that wheelchair tennis is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. And it started in the US in 1976 when a gentleman called Brad Parks, who had a skiing accident and had a spinal cord injury, went out with a colleague and a friend and started experimenting with trying to play tennis. And they played and worked out that two bounces was quite a good idea, and probably never dreamed of what you can see on that picture now, of wheelchair tennis being played on court one at Wimbledon. And I will describe the pictures a little bit, so for people who will benefit from a description. So that opening slide just says wheelchair tennis at the All England Club 50th anniversary, and there's a picture of two female wheelchair players playing on court one. Got to do it here. Oh. So, and I happen to be involved around this time. The first exhibition was played out on a outside court, as they call them at Wimbledon, by some British players, two of whom are pictured, Matt Foucher and Kevin Plowman, and they played a doubles exhibition with Shane Everett-Sharp and Dave Gardner. And prior to that, there were lots of discussions around how do we get something going at Wimbledon, and this was the start. Fast forwarding a few years, so the exhibition continued for a few years, and in 2005 was the first, and they still call it gentlemen's doubles at Wimbledon, gentlemen's doubles wheelchair tennis, and it was won by, actually, I didn't coach him at the time, but Giant Mystery was one of the players that I coached, and he won, alongside Michael Jeremias, the first men's doubles at Wimbledon. And the significance of that is men and doubles. Yeah. So at this stage there were no women playing. So a few years later, women's doubles was introduced. And there you see the winners pictured on the left, Corey Homan and Esther Vergeer, and on the right, Lucy Shuker from Great Britain and Danny Di Toro from Australia. So now we've got women and doubles. And then several years later, in 2016, singles gets introduced, women and men. And the first slide shows the winner and runner-up, winner Jiska Griffin from the Netherlands and Annick van Vliet, also from the Netherlands. And in the same year, and we had a British winner that year, Gordon Reid. The same year he won gold medal in Rio, and the runner-up, Stefan Olsen. So we've now got men's and women's doubles and singles. And 2016 happened to, who's heard of Gordon Reid and Alfie Hewitt? Hands up. Some people, yeah, but yeah, they're now pretty well known, and they won the doubles in 2016. And then, again, a couple of years later, in wheelchair tennis, there's also a division for players with an upper limb impairment, in addition to a lower limb impairment, which is called the quad division. and that was introduced in 2019. Along with doubles. So doubles came at the same time in that context. And then another milestone, 2021, first match played on court 1. I don't know if any of you have been to Wimbledon, but you've got the outside courts, court 1 and centre. Centre's the dream, and I do believe we will get there eventually. But 2021 was the first match played on court 1 at Wimbledon, which was a massive milestone. Without going, I haven't gone into the details, but that journey of doubles and singles, a lot of it was related to the fact that there were discussions around whether the wheelchairs would damage the grass. Would they be able to play singles on grass? Because it is more difficult to push on grass than it is on other surfaces. But all these things over time have been proven to be possible. And then 2024, not so long ago, Alfie Hewitt, British player, wins Wimbledon. And Louise, you probably commentated on that match, did you?
Yeah.
That was a pretty emotional time for all of us, although we're supposed to be neutral when we're working. But to have a British player win again on court 1, very, very special. But then to that wider picture of, and this is why I asked about that trickle-down effect, the wider picture of what Wimbledon is bringing is, it's not just what happens on the court, what happens around the court. So I work at Wimbledon and I'm the wheelchair tennis player liaison officer, but over the 10 years that I've been doing it, I've become more and more embedded and I do less and less in a way, and my aim is not to have a job, because we've become so embedded in the championships, and that a wheelchair player, maybe someone like Louise or another player, will take on the player liaison element of what I do. But this is just pictures around the grounds. So if you walk around Wimbledon, there's images of obviously non-disabled players all around the complex, but there are images of wheelchair players all around the complex. So everyone that's visiting Wimbledon, walking around, are seeing disabled people, wheelchair tennis players, in the corridors. And then something that they've worked on really hard over the last few years, and again, there's still improvements to be made, but accessibility around the grounds during the championships has improved dramatically over the last few years. And I think that is a consequence and linked to the fact that they have a wheelchair tennis event. So they had to think about improving access for the players, and that has linked into them having to think very carefully about improving access for everybody, and certainly into the new improvements that are being made. And if they finally get planning permission to develop over the road at the golf course, that will be very, very accessible and inclusive. Same thing, some pictures of the hill and Henman Hill, or Murray Mound, you want to call it. This year, significant improvements were made to the hill to enable more wheelchair users to be able to watch comfortably. They made the ramp less steep and increased the number of wheelchair viewing spaces on the hill. And I think these are all of a consequence, not all of a consequence, but linked to the fact that wheelchair tennis is so key at the event that it filters out into the spectators as well. And then, obviously Wimbledon is an exclusive club, you have to be a member, but Gordon and Alfie, who we mentioned earlier, are both members of the All England Club, and throughout the year they play and practice there, but they're also involved in events for members. So the wider membership is learning more about wheelchair tennis and more broadly about disability. And this is Alfie and Gordon talking at a celebration dinner that was hosted in their honour for their success generally, but in particular at Paris 2024, where they won the doubles gold. And then, this is something I actually lead on, is the club run All Abilities Days, where members of the club get to meet disabled players and try different elements of disability tennis. And here you'll see there's a picture here of Gordon Reid who's a wheelchair player, playing with an eye mask on and using an audible ball and trying visually impaired tennis. And then the other picture shows a group of us. So Gordon's in there, Tracy Compton, who's totally blind, tennis player, and myself and a few others, but members getting the chance to learn more about wheelchair tennis and other elements of disability tennis, which I don't think would be happening if they weren't hosting the wheelchair tennis event. And then there's an event called Pay Your Way to Wimbledon, which is a national event where tennis players of all ages and abilities across the country play in competitions, and with the finals being played at the All England Club. And a few years ago, disability events were included for the first time, and so now wheelchair tennis players, para standings in this year for the first time, get the opportunity to play at a pretty prestigious venue through a pathway. And talking of para standing, there's some of you might recognise. Anyone watch The Last Leg? Any of you might watch Adam Hills, who's a presenter, who's a big advocate of para standing tennis, and there's a picture of him playing at the All England Club. And then talking about that wider picture and the number of people that go to the Wimbledon Museum, it's thousands. And you'll see the picture on the right is an exhibit. So there's a wheelchair tennis exhibit in the museum that you can't miss. Everyone has to walk past it. If you go on a tour with the guides, they'll walk you past the wheelchair tennis honours board, and they talk about wheelchair tennis. So everyone that visits the Wimbledon Museum is made aware of wheelchair tennis and increasingly other elements of tennis. And this year, there'll be a special exhibition at the museum celebrating 50 years of wheelchair tennis. And then another example of a club event, and this was at the end of last year, where Wimbledon hosted a tennis conference on the history of tennis, celebrating inclusion. So the main themes were around Arthur Ashe and his success at Wimbledon, Billie Jean King and the LGBTQ+ community, and then wheelchair tennis were the three themes running through the day at a conference that was open to the public. And then I'll describe the picture in a minute, but if you have a little look at that picture, this is this year's championship poster. And you've got centre court in the background, and then you've got some non-disabled men, non-disabled females, and 2 wheelchair players in the official poster. And for me, that encapsulates where Wimbledon has got to. Yeah. And I wasn't involved in lobbying for that. It's just become what they will do. Yeah. It's embedded, and I can describe that from my personal experience of working at the championships, and maybe Louise too in her role in the commentary team, that it's accelerated over the last few years, but we are completely embedded. Yeah. So in the past, it used to be wheelchair players and players. Now the discussion is just players. Yeah. So it's taken a long time. Wheelchair tennis is 50 years old. Wimbledon started its first exhibition in 2001, and 25 years later, it's where it is. So I think it's been a journey, a very exciting journey, and hopefully some of this will trickle down. But I think that's the challenge: is how do we use events like Wimbledon, of such well known, they're on TV. How do we influence the local tennis club to produce a poster like that? And there are clubs that do it, but that's the bit that we've really got to work on, the whole ecosystem. And yeah, that concludes my little talk. So thank you. I hope I did Geoff Newton justice.
No, that was brilliant, Mark. Thank you so much. And while I welcome the panel back, just thank you so much. I think that was a brilliant summary of just how far the club has come. It's quite hard to put it into a short presentation, but I can certainly vouch for what you said. I've been on the side of a player. I'm now a broadcaster, so I work in the media team. But I've also been a fan and a spectator, and I can honestly say the club are working on all those areas, which is very exciting. So I just have one question for each of you, just before we wrap up and go to a couple of questions from our lovely audience. I would like you to sum up in a couple of sentences what you would say to a young person who doesn't think sport is for them.
The short answer is I'd say is for them, and then the challenge that we have is how we present it in a form that is for them. So it's not us making assumptions about how they want to engage with sport. It's saying, how would you like to engage with sport or physical activity? And we don't care what that looks like. Yeah.
I like that. Don't make assumptions. I like that.
I would probably say don't be afraid to try a new sport or fitness, and no matter whether you're disabled or not, you know, you can find your own adaptation, and you can find your way of participating in that fitness or sport. So give it a go, and don't be afraid to give it that go, really, because you'll grow and learn from the experience and partake in.
Brilliant.
Beautifully put. Yeah, I would just say maybe broaden your perspective on what sport is. I mean, all activity is good. And actually, dancing obviously can be sport, or it can be activity. But even walking is good. You know, and what you'd say to young people, I think, is how can you gamify it? How can you put a little bit more fun into something that you're doing anyway, just to motivate yourself to do it more? Because I think that's, you know, young people want to have a bit of fun. So think about how you can attach a bit of fun to, you know, to a physical activity. It doesn't need to be called sport. It needs to be some kind of activity.
So I was just going to add to that, because I think sometimes I said earlier, we focus on the sport, and what we should be focusing on is what sport brings. Yeah. So it's not necessary that we want you to play a particular sport. We want to bring you into community that means you will meet people, etc., etc. It's not just the sport; it's what sport brings.
I think that's beautifully put, and I fully back those points completely. Might sound strange coming from a former athlete, but it doesn't have to have a label of a sport. It can just be going for a walk, going for a wheel. Any of those types of movement are just so good for the body and the mind, but the stuff that it brings, it's fun and it's good for you. So fantastic words of advice there. We've got time for literally, let's go for 2 questions from our audience before we wrap up. So I think we had one there, and we'll go there for those 2. Would be great. We've got a mic for you, which would be, thank you, Sam. So we'll go for these 2. Thank you, guys.
I've got loads, so I'm going to try and whittle it down. And
don't worry, you can ask us after.
Pick
your favourite now.
Thank you. I'm Mary Henry, by the way. I work for London FA, and I'm a para-female specialist football coach as well. So this is right up my alley, so to say. I think when we talk about changing what sport looks like in the future for people with disabilities, how do you see the education that's given to facilitators and coach having an impact, but also how do you see policy change impacting the way funding's distributed, the amount it's funded and the way it's distributed, and how national governing bodies align with that? Sorry, it's really long-winded, that one.
No, great. Brilliant question, and right up my street. I'm training coaches tomorrow. That's essentially what I do most of the time. And I think the policy question, the challenge I put back to governing bodies, and in particular tennis, is if 20% of the population are disabled, 20% of your resource should be going to the disability element of your sport. And we're a long way from that, but that's how I try to present it from a policy point of view. And from the coach education, is absolutely. I think workforce education, so broadening it, not just coaches, but voluntary committees. The whole workforce need to be on board with the inclusive message, because we've had experience in the past of training coaches. They go back into their club, but they've then got to convince other people within the club. So the workforce development is absolutely critical, and we've got to get inclusive sport embedded into coach education. And some governing bodies are doing more than others, but we have to have a workforce, to the Zumba point, that can coach genuinely everyone. You know, most tennis clubs have a sign outside saying everybody welcome. but do they really mean everybody? And it's challenging that concept and training coaches and the wider workforce accordingly. Do you know Conor McBrearty? Has he left London FA?
No, it might be before my time.
He might have gone.
I think you kind of covered it all, Mark, to be honest.
So nothing to add.
Yeah.
Well said.
Next question.
Yeah, I've got this question for Mark. I mean, actually, I just want to thank you all for sharing something that touches me in every way. Zumba, capoeira, it's something I actually got into. It's a Brazilian practice as well, where it's about community and like having fun and being included. But Mark, I'm just so curious about the blind tennis. Could you just elaborate a bit more? Because that is just fascinating. How does it work?
Brilliant. And I think I'm going to. Louise's book is on sale over there. Mine will be out later in the year. And I was reflecting yesterday because I've been asked a lot of questions by my ghostwriter, who happens to be the same ghostwriter that Louise used. And for me, blind tennis really illustrates that anybody can play, in this case tennis, but any sport, through appropriate adaptations. So the totally blind, what we call B1 in sport, you play with an audible ball. That's a foam ball with a table tennis ball in it with ball bearings in. I think it will evolve as well, but it's an audible ball, and the totally blind play in the service boxes, so in a smaller court, an adapted court, and they have tactile lines so they can feel where they are. And the totally blind players get up to 3 bounces, so they can hear the ball a little bit in the air, and then they'll hear the first bounce, which will allow them to locate. If you get a chance to Google it and have a look, the world number 1 lives in North London, number 1 male, and for me, it really emphasises that anyone can play. And then the partially sighted play on a medium-sized tennis court with the same ball, and they will have 1, 2, or 3 bounces depending on their sight classification. But yeah, it's interesting you asked the question, because I think for me that I mentioned it earlier, it's an area of the sport that's still not that well known, but it really emphasises that anybody can play. And back to what we said earlier, I play with blind and partially sighted people and enjoy it. Yeah, and that's a message that I really want to promote generally, that Sam and I can play doubles together, we can play against each other, and that applies across all impairment types. And that can be the case in all sports. If we get back to the coach education piece, if we get people thinking differently about how they can adapt to include.
That's brilliant. Thank you both for your fantastic questions there. And, we're around after, so any questions for these guys or myself, please do come and ask. Can we just have a quick round of applause for our brilliant panel? Honestly, all 3 of you, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing such brilliant insights, so much thought-provoking conversation. It's really appreciated. Just a few little points from me before we wrap up. We're joined tonight by Fiona Jarvis from Blue Badge Access Awards, the final of which are happening on the 30th of April at the South Place Hotel on the Bougie Hotel rooftop bar. And it's all about celebrating exceptional accessibility. So tickets are available for that now on the website, or you can speak to Fiona. Give us away, Fiona. She is here if you want to ask any questions, but that sounds like a fantastic event. On the 10th of June, the Future of Fashion, the New York edition in America, which is a side event of the UN, is coming up. We're joined tonight by Klaus Hockner, all the way from Austria, who's partnering with us for the event. So lovely to have you here. It's definitely something to look out for. And on the 18th of September, the Future of Fashion show, which is part of London Fashion Week at St Mary's Church in Marylebone. Tickets are available for that now too. So some great things coming up. And before we wrap up, I just, of course, want to thank our sponsors and supporters, to the Sunflower Hidden Disability and the Future of Being for all of their support. Kindred, this fantastic venue, it's beautiful. I think we can all agree, and thank you for supporting what we're doing. Of course, Wimbledon for the brilliant input with the presentation. Neo Walk Sticker, CRBE, the Brazilian Consulate, Bplay, who provide our subtitles and translation, Zumba, Diatani Design, and Accurate Consultancy. Without all this support, these events wouldn't be possible. So a huge thank you to all of them. And just to wrap up the conversation, I think I mentioned before, I think hopefully we're all feeling inspired to move, but let's continue these conversations beyond tonight. We're of course celebrating 50 years of wheelchair tennis, so let's be a part of that celebration this year, but support each other and let's grow this movement in terms of making sport and movement accessible for everybody. Thank you all very much for coming and have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Well done, Louise. Thank you.
Thank you guys. You're brilliant. Oh, thank you. And you guys were brilliant. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you both. Thank you all of you very much for making that really easy. To be honest, it's brilliant. It's so hard, because I feel like we could talk all night. Like there were so many things I'm like, what do I ask for? But I was like, I know it's funny.
Questions were coming. I could have spoken for
I know.
just on the context of the history of